A very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICANN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. So yesterday I had not posted the ICANN video because I got really very busy. So today the video is going to be longer because we will be covering today's as well as yesterday's newspaper. So it's going to be more longer. So let's start the day with the motivational story of the day. So this is about from poachers to protectors. So basically this is about 1980s in Assam where the poaching of rhinos was very rampant. So the poaching of rhinos and harvesting its skin, its horn, and then exporting it to Bhutan, China had been a very lucrative market, and there were a lot of poachers. The state government also did not do much, though it was trying to do within its limited efforts, but then it was not possible to control the rampant poaching of rhinos. So many rhinos lost their lives, and this became a huge problem. But during that time, later on, there was also the agitation that was going on for creating this Bodoland autonomous district. So finally, the Bodoland Autonomous Council came into being, and that realized the importance of environment and the importance of ecosystem. These council, it had people who belonged to this particular area, and they knew that conserving the environment was very important and critical to their own livelihood and well-being in that area. So what they decided was the Bodoland Autonomous Council, it took a soft stand on these poachers. It decided that these poachers we should not go hard on them, they should not be punished. Rather, we need to explain to them what is the importance of conserving these species, what is the importance of conserving the forest and the entire ecosystem, which is critical for our own well-being. So it finally achieved this, and it convinced the poachers, and it made them realize the importance of environment. So finally, these poachers, they were appointed as guards to these forests in the Manas National Park. These poachers were rather appointed by the local communities in the Bodoland Autonomous Council as the guards to the forests, and people who were poaching and killing the rhinos before, they actually became the protectors of rhinos, and they acted as informants and guards, and they protected the rhinos from being poached. So this is a motivational story, of course, but it again it has a huge amount of uses when it comes to your exam. The first thing is it shows the importance of involving the local community when it comes to protection. So in the case of local communities, it is very difficult to deal with the traditionals or the tribals who are usually used to even hunting the animals. So it is very difficult to convince them about conservation of the species. But in this case, how beautifully these poachers were tackled, they were handled, and instead of punishing them, the local administration decided to take their own help, and even they were given remuneration for protecting the forests. So this shows the importance of involving the local communities when it comes to conservation efforts. So whenever you have any question or any essay about conservation of the environment, you can use this story to show the importance of involving the local communities and taking them into confidence if you really want to succeed in the conservation efforts. Otherwise, the state will keep making its efforts, but then these poachers will again keep killing the rhinos. So it is always the best to involve the local communities in the conservation efforts if it has to succeed in the long run. The second thing that you can use this story for is how a reformatory attitude has actually helped. So in the criminal justice system, when we read about it, we know there are two types. One is retributory, which believes in giving punishment. It believes that punishing the person who has committed a crime is going to set things right. But on the other hand, there is another approach which is reformatory. So which believes that people are inherently good and they can be changed if they are counseled, if they are told that what they are doing is really wrong. So in this case, how a reformatory approach, these poachers were hard bent on poaching and they were so cruel and they committed all those criminal acts, but still how they could be transformed and how their attitudes towards conservation could be reformed by the local administration is again noteworthy. So this shows that if these poachers had they been punished, then today the government would not have had that support of the local population in conservation. But because of the adoption of a reformatory attitude, the government succeeded in getting the cooperation and contribution from the local population in the conservation efforts. So this can be used in such case studies or in whenever you're writing an essay on that. So now let's begin with the topics of the day. Let's start with the first topic of the day. It is related to the education issues. So education as a topic comes under your GS2 syllabus. So you can find a question on that. Previously in the ICANN videos, we have had elaborate and comprehensive discussions on the national education policy, what are the various provisions or the features of the policy, what is the focus area of the policy, and also its advantages, its importance, and its limitations. So that is, we have looked at it at a very holistic manner. So we have completely analyzed the policy critically. So that if you have not watched those videos, you can go back and watch. So now that the National Education Policy was announced, the government has now rolled out the National Education Policy 2020. So if you have read about the National Education Policy, this particular policy had one feature that it promised, that is to overhaul the assessment system in the entire country. So if we talk of the current assessment system, look at the various boards, whether it is a state board or the central board, the focus is mainly on assessing the children through the marks that they fetch in the exams. So recently you would have seen how the cutoffs at the Delhi University colleges have reached 100%, which shows that there is a failure of the educational system in India, because 100% cutoff is too high to be believable, and it is actually only encouraged rote learning and memorization, and not the actual education which has to arouse that curiosity and inquisitiveness among the children. So in order to overhaul this, under the NEP, government has promised that it is going to overhaul the assessment system, where there is going to be a shift from the current rote-based learning, how the children are assessed based on how much they score in the exams. There is going to be a shift over how they develop holistically, over their holistic development and a holistic assessment which not just considers the scores that these children get in the exams. So this shift was envisaged in the National Education Policy 2020. As a part of this reform, government has introduced what is called as Parak. If you are a very consistent follower of ICANN videos, then I had also asked about Parak in the prelims questions that I used to ask every day in the last 1.5 or 2 months. So Parak is basically a reform that is introduced by the government to overhaul the assessment way it is being done in the India by various boards. So that is about Parak. So let's not worry about the full form of Parak, because it is very long, and also you will not have enough space and time in the exam to expand Parak. So if you just write Parak, also it has a Hindi meaning which is like Parak is how to test something or something like that. So therefore you don't have to worry about expanding Parak. So just you have to know this initiative by government which is called as Parak, which is to overhaul the assessment system in India from the one that is based on rote learning, where marks in the examinations become very important, to the one where the assessment of the child is done very holistically and not just on the basis of the marks obtained in the tests. So as a part of Parak, government has now using this STARS program, which is aided by the World Bank. So this STARS is a World Bank aided program which has an outlay of more than 5,700 crore. So let me tell you the expansion or the elaboration of STARS. STARS is strengthening teaching, learning and results for states. So that is what STARS is. So STARS is a program which is also aided by the World Bank. So through STARS, now the government wants to introduce these reforms under the Parak. So STARS is basically about everything like improving the teaching learning experience, improving the quality of education, improving the access of education, teacher training, and improving the quality of the teachers, whether education is inclusive or not, and also assessment reforms are also a part of the STARS initiative. So under STARS initiative, government now is introducing Parak to overhaul the assessment system in India. So this is what you must be knowing. So you have to mention the name of Parak when you're analyzing the new education policy. Now let's move on to the next topic. The next topic we'll be talking about is the role of governors. So this again is a part of your GS paper 2 under the Constitution, Parliament and its various functionaries, basically about the Constitution and its various offices. So on the role of governors, this has always been a very favorite polity question where you may be asked about the governor as a link between the center and the states. So because a governor is a head of the state but is appointed by the center, so therefore a governor acts as that link between the center and the states in a federal polity. So what kind of role he or she should play and how should it be? So all of that can be a very important aspect of the question that can be asked in UPSC. Previously in the ICANN videos, we have already come across several examples of the offices of governors that were recently in controversy. So we have seen several such examples. We have also seen the basics related to governor, the office that is occupied by the governor, and issues that surrounds the office of the governor. What are the various controversies or the issues that are surrounding the office of governor, and what should be the reforms that must be done in the future, and the recommendations of various committees who have commented upon the role of the governor. All of that we have seen previously. We have also discussed a question based on the governors as part of our question answer discussion. So this is another example of the controversial role that the governor can play, and also an example of how a governor can transgress his or her constitutional limitations and come into the executive domain. So Bhagat Singh Koshyari is the governor of Maharashtra. So what has happened is, due to the pandemic, there has been a lockdown, and after that, when the states are unlocking, center has given a lot of flexibility to the states as to decide for themselves when they have to unlock what, depending upon the local rise in the number of infections. So Maharashtra, as we know, has seen the most number of infections every day. So Maharashtra decided to close down the religious places when many other states decided to open up the religious places nearly 3 months before. So this has kind of concerned the governor of Maharashtra, and he wrote a letter to the chief minister questioning the decision of the chief minister to keep the religious places in the state closed. So this first of all shows how the governor has transgressed his or her constitutional powers and duties and has come into the executive domain, because deciding when to open what depending upon the level of rise in the infections in the state is purely an executive decision. So in this case, governor has stepped into or encroached into the executive domain and has questioned an executive decision which he or she should not have done. So this is the first issue in this case. The second issue is also that he has said the chief minister has suddenly turned out to be secular, and also he has went on to comment that the gods and goddesses in the state of Maharashtra have been condemned into a lockdown. So he has kind of mocked at the decision taken by the chief minister, which is again not the tone and the tenor with which the constitutional office of the governor should be speaking. There is a certain amount of dignity which is associated with a constitutional office of the governor, and that has to be maintained by the incumbent. But the tenor and tone of what the governor has spoken about, it does not suit a constitutional office of the governor. So this is again the second issue related to this particular issue. And also we must remember that the governor would have taken an oath when he or she enters the office, and then he would have sworn his allegiance to the constitution. So that does not make the governor or give the power to the governor to transgress into the executive domain and pass some comments which are not according to the spirit of the constitution. So this is one more example of how the governor has been not acting according to the spirit of the constitution, and also the tussle between the governor and the chief minister, which does not lead to a very conducive environment for good governance in the state. So this example can also be quoted in your answers whenever you're talking about the role of governors. So now we move on to the next topic. The next topic we'll be discussing is the issues related to manufacturing. So this is a part of your GS3 syllabus when you are talking about industrialization and the primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector. How have they grown? So this analysis is a part of your GS3 syllabus. So as far as manufacturing is concerned, we know that manufacturing almost contributes about 17 or 18% to our total GDP, and because well, you have read your economic surveys and all that, you must have come across the fact that India has a missing middle. That is, from being an agricultural dominated economy, we have directly transitioned to a service dominant economy, and we have missed the middle, or we have missed the manufacturing middle. And manufacturing is that sector which is also the largest generator of jobs. Agriculture, on the one hand, does not provide a lot of remuneration, and service sector, on the other hand, is more skill oriented. But the manufacturing sector in between can absorb a lot of population, can generate a lot of jobs. So that is why we need to give more importance to the manufacturing sector, and we have to develop it. So during the LPG reforms also, you must have read in the critical analysis of the LPG reforms that the LPG reforms actually led to this missing middle, and also what is termed as the jobless growth, because we grew from directly agriculture to the service economy, that, and also in the manufacturing we focused more on technology intensified manufacturing, and also the one that is based on capital intensive industries. So we did not focus on the manufacturing in the middle enough to be able to generate a lot number of jobs. So that is why the manufacturing as such has been just able to produce nearly 17 to 18% of the gross domestic product of India. So that is why the government came out with various policies like the Make in India, the Digital India, Startup India, and all that, and now Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. And when Make in India was announced, the main aim was to increase the contribution of manufacturing from the current 17% to the GDP to nearly 25% of the GDP, and also to generate 100 million jobs. So this was the main aim of the new manufacturing policy and also Make in India policy. So therefore we know that the government is now on the path to increase the self-reliance or Atmanirbharta, and also to increase the domestic manufacturing. As a part of the government's efforts to increase the domestic manufacturing, government introduced what is called as a production linked incentive. So whenever something gets produced, definitely there is going to be some incentive that is given to the domestic producers of one particular item. So that is precisely the premise of this whole policy of production linked incentive. Now this PLI was based on what was called as phased manufacturing program that was introduced in 2016 and 17. As the name itself suggests, phased manufacturing program means the company or the firm, the one manufacturing unit starts with manufacturing a low value unit, and in a phased manner it is going to add more and more value to its product, its final product. It's going to build on that value addition and is going to finally make a high value product. So it's basically start with the low value product, and as and when the manufacturing unit matures, it will start manufacturing high value products. So for that, the government is going to give a production linked incentive. So this was the whole idea of the phased manufacturing program, so that the domestic value addition improves a lot. Now, one of the issues with the manufacturing sector in India, you must have read that we actually export a lot of raw materials to countries, let's say China. We are exporting some raw materials. China is going to make use of this raw materials, add value to it, and it is going to sell us back a high value product at a much higher price. Rather, we should in India have more value addition in our manufacturing pipeline. This was the whole focus of this initiative. So we have to improve the local value addition, because a higher value product is going to fetch us lot more price than selling something at a lower value addition. So selling a finished product is going to fetch us more value than selling a raw material. Similarly, a higher value product is going to fetch us more value than a lower value product. So the value addition in the domestic manufacturing sector was extremely low, and in order to improve this value addition domestically, this program was launched, which is about the production linked incentive and the phased manufacturing product. But however, there were issues related to this. So let's first analyze the success and the failure. So if we talk of the success of the production linked incentive, the production by the domestic units did increase a lot. So in the year 2016 and 17, the production was, let's say, 13 billion, and in the year 2019-20, the production increased to 32 billion. So we can see that because of the encouragement by the government to domestic manufacturing under the production linked incentive, the production did increase from $13 billion in 1617 to $32 billion in 1920. But however, when the data was analyzed using the annual survey of industries data, we found that even though India increased the production of, or rather India produced a large quantity of low value items, it did not add much value. That is, the per unit cost of the items produced in India was less. So even though India produced 100 items of rupees 10 each, India did not produce one item of rupees 100. So that means the domestic value addition was actually very, very less. In fact, the domestic value addition ranged anywhere between 1.6% to 17.4%, and for most of the firms, the domestic value addition was less than 10%. So even though we produced a lot of goods which increased the value of the production, but the value addition actually was less than 10%, and that did not happen much. So this was about the critical analysis of this particular production linked incentive scheme. And also under the production linked incentive, as the name itself suggests, government is going to give some incentives for the manufacturers. So be it subsidies or any kind of such support. So if we take the cost of mobile manufacturing to be about 100 rupees, then the effective cost means whatever is the cost plus the government subsidies. So the effective cost is going to go down because of the government support through the subsidies. The effective cost of mobile manufacturing in India comes out to be anywhere with 92 rupees, but in China it is just 79 rupees, and even in Vietnam it is going to be 89 rupees, but in India the cost of mobile manufacturing is 92, which is the effective cost even after considering all the incentives like subsidies which the government of India provides through the production linked incentive scheme. Even after these incentives, our cost of production is much higher compared to the cost of production in China. So therefore our product is not even so to say, the competitiveness of the India's product is less when compared to the China's product, because even after the incentives and support of the government, the cost of our product is much higher compared to China's product. So therefore, this is one more thing that the production linked incentive does not help us a lot in increasing our exports, because our cost of production is still much higher compared to the Chinese cost of production. So this is one more analysis. So you may have a question in general about the functioning of the manufacturing sector in India. So why is it that the manufacturing in India is not taking off in spite of various efforts by the government like Make in India, PLI, Digital India, Startup India? Why is the manufacturing sector still being that missing middle, and we have not been able to increase the contribution of manufacturing sector to the nation's GDP? So this is about the analysis of the manufacturing sector. So whenever you're writing analysis of the manufacturing sector and what is ailing the manufacturing sector in India, you have to make a mention of these production linked incentive and how it has gone wrong. So one issue is that the value addition is not happening in India, which is actually it must happen. And secondly, the incentives and the support given by the government to the manufacturing sector is not sufficient to make it competitive at the global level. So for that, you can use these examples to support your arguments. Now we move on to the next topic. The next topic we'll be talking about is disaster management or urban floods. So you may have a full-fledged question on the recent phenomena of urban floods that are happening in Hyderabad, in Chennai, in Mumbai and Bangalore. So these metro cities are facing the urban floods year after year. So urbanization, the topic itself is a part of your GS1 syllabus. So if urban floods as a consequence of our bad urbanization policies, you can find this as a question in your GS paper 1. Or if that is considered to be a disaster, then how to manage the disaster, what are the causes of this urban floods, which is a disaster, can be a part of your GS3 syllabus under the disaster management topic. So we all know that in the last previous 2-3 days there have been floods in Hyderabad. So this has stranded many people, it has killed a lot of people. So this has been a news, and even before such cities have already faced the problem of urban floods. So what are the causes of urban floods? Again, that is what, even in this case, in the case of Hyderabad, it can be used as a case study when you are answering a broader question of what are the causes of urban floods. So you can use the Hyderabad flood as a case study to explain that these may be the causes of the urban floods, which are also very similar to what happened in Chennai, Mumbai or Bangalore. So one is that the various water bodies, be it lakes and wetlands in these cities, are being encroached upon because we are on this rapid urbanizing trend. So due to rapid and unsustainable urbanization that we are doing, the lake beds and the wetlands and all other water bodies which could have provided us a cushion to absorb these extra water, they have now been encroached upon. So we are building buildings over these wetlands. These wetlands are converted into land which is again sold, and there are land developers, there are land sharks who are developing buildings in these wetlands. So the wetlands and the lake beds are being encroached upon. Secondly, Hyderabad or any other city for that matter has these storm water drains. These are those drains into which the rainwater is supposed to go and flow through. But these storm water drains are again being encroached upon. They have a lot of accumulation in them, so they have not been desilted, so they don't end up absorbing a lot of rainwater which they are supposed to do. So the storm water drains are also getting blocked, which is not being removed by the urban authorities. Hyderabad also has a very old sewerage and drainage system which again needs to be overhauled, and it needs to be repaired, and then again we need to plan for the sewerage and drainage system in the city of Hyderabad, which is very old. So this old drainage system has a lot of issues and leakages and loopholes which needs to be plugged. So this again is a cause of one of the causes of the urban floods that has now happened. So we know that a lot of urban floods are happening because of the encroachment of the water bodies present in these urban areas. So a study by the Center for Science and Environment in 2016 showed that more than 3,200 hectares of water bodies have been encroached upon in Hyderabad between 1989 to 2001. So between these years, more than 3,200 hectares of the water bodies have been encroached just in Hyderabad. This is shown by the study of Science and Environment in 2016. So this data can be cited to show how there is a rapid and unsustainable urbanization which is taking a toll on these cities. So you must have heard the concept of urban heat islands. There is a lot of concretization in the urban areas. So wherever there is soil, that is being replaced by concrete, which is not just adding to the holding or trapping of heat in the urban areas, but again when the rain falls, if the soil is there, it would absorb a lot of water, but the concrete doesn't absorb. So all of this water will then end up accumulating and creating a flood like situation. So these are the various reasons why the urban floods have happened. So you may have a full-fledged question about the recent occurrences of urban floods which have become an annual phenomena in many of these cities. So what are all the reasons because of which the urban floods are happening, and what can be done to tackle them? So this can be a full-fledged question. Now we move on to the next topic. The next topic we are discussing is the issues related to health, which is again health related issues are a part of your GS2 syllabus. So this global burden of diseases is a report that comes out. So this report has now come out, which is talking about the data related to various aspects of health in 2019. So the report is the global burden of diseases. So this is a very authentic popular report which is usually used to quote the health related data in our GS papers. So the global burden of disease report has talked about the top 5 risk factors in India that is causing death. So as you can see in this pie chart, the most number of deaths are caused due to air pollution, and then high blood pressure, use of tobacco, poor diet, that's something that's rich in a lot of fats and glycerides, but then it's poor in terms of nutrients. So we are talking about junk food. So then also a high blood sugar. So these are the top 5 causes of death in India according to the Global Burden of Disease report, and this report was published in the journal Lancet. So if you have a just cursory look at the top 5 causes of risk factors that is causing deaths in India, you find that all of these are related to our lifestyle. So all of these are something that is related to the non-communicable diseases. So these are those risk factors which are arising out of our bad lifestyle, our sedentary lifestyle. Whether it is BP or poor diet or sugar are all because of our sedentary lifestyle. Again, air pollution is again not infectious, tobacco again not infectious. So you can see that the burden in India has shifted from the communicable diseases like dengue, malaria, etc. It has shifted to the non-communicable diseases, which is mostly because of our bad lifestyle and the lifestyle habits that we have adopted. So in the year 1990, out of the total burden of diseases on India, 29% of the total disease burden was because of the non-communicable diseases. But now in 2019, 58% of the total burden of diseases in India is because of the non-communicable diseases. So you can see how there has been a transition or a shift from the communicable diseases to the non-communicable diseases. Now in India, overall, more number of deaths are caused due to non-communicable diseases than the communicable diseases. So again, air pollution is going to lead us to cancer, which is again a part of an example of non-communicable diseases. But however, one thing that is noteworthy is over the years we have advances in the technology, in the way we treat various diseases, because of which we have been able to increase the life expectancy of Indians. So in the 1990s, the life expectancy was somewhere around 60 years, and now the average life expectancy is nearly 71 years. So this is just the average life expectancy of 71 years, which again differs from state to state. In Kerala, it could be 77 years. So we have advanced in terms of the average life expectancy, which was just 60 years to around 71 years in 2019. So that is a good thing that has happened. But however, if you see, the one thing is to measure the average life expectancy. Another measure is an average healthy life expectancy. It is the measure of how many years you are living in a healthy manner. So this healthy life expectancy is again around just 61%. So which shows that from 61 years, from 61 years till 71 years, which is the average life expectancy, that span of 10 years, a person is living, but however he is living with a lot of illness and diseases. So the quality of life is compromised, even though we have increased the number of years we live on earth, but the quality of life is compromised because of disease and illness. So this is one more thing that you have to keep in mind. And secondly, the second graph that you have written here. So one I said is that the non-communicable diseases burden was 29% in 1990, which has increased to 58% in 2019. So because of these non-communicable diseases, like for instance, the air pollution causing cancer, and there is a cancer related death. So the person is dying a premature death, because person has not reached his average life expectancy age and then he is dying of natural causes. No, the person is dying because of unnatural causes, so that is, it is a premature death. So the premature deaths because of non-communicable diseases that were occurring in 1990 was just 22%, but now the premature deaths due to non-communicable diseases have now increased to 50%. So this again is the important data that is related to health. You have to know this shift or the transition that we have made from communicable to non-communicable, and also you have to be able to reproduce such graphs in the exam which talks about some important data. So this is about this topic. Now we move on to the next topic. This is about the World Food Day. We already saw about the World Food Program and the reasons why it went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and what kind of contributions it has made to India as well as at the global level to combat hunger in disaster and conflict-ridden areas. So this was a small piece of advertisement that I found in today's newspaper, but this ad had very informative data. So this is talking about what was India's population, food grains, vegetables, fish, milk, eggs, poultry in 2000, what was India's production in 2000 and in 2019. So this can act as a very good repository of data for you, where everything has been given at the same place. So you already know comparatively how much food grains we produced, about how much vegetables and fruits we produced, fish, milk, eggs, poultry. Again, in your questions on animal husbandry and the whatever that you study as part of your GS3 syllabus under animal husbandry, you must know data related to the production of fish, milk, eggs and poultry in the country. So that you must know. So all of this data is very helpful for you. So you can take a screenshot of this and learn this, keep this data under your data repository so that you have good access to all the data at one place. So there is nothing to explain here, just refer to this data and memorize it and use it in your answers. So we now move on to the next topic. Next topic we'll be discussing is about protectionism versus integration with the global supply chains. So and also the fact that because of the pandemic and even before that, there has been this wave of deglobalization where countries had started to look inwards, and many commentators had commented about the wave of deglobalization now and inward looking tendencies and protectionism on part of various countries. Similarly, now government has started with the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. You may have a question on the analysis of Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. So therefore, this whole analysis about in these three articles was about the comparison of India with Bangladesh. India on the one hand is trying to be more protective, it's raising its tariffs, and through Atmanirbhar Bharat it wants to kind of look inwards. But again, Bangladesh on the other hand has lowered its tariffs, and the kind of advantages that Bangladesh has got because of lowering of the tariffs. So this is used as a case study to show how India should be more open to the outside world. It has to integrate with the global supply chains and improve its export performance if India wants to clock a good economic growth. So let's discuss this case study. So the comparison that is made with Bangladesh is regarding the IMF data. The IMF data has shown that in the time period of 2020 to 2025, so over this time period, the Bangladesh per capita GDP, so the per capita GDP of Bangladesh is going to be marginally higher than that of India. So per capita GDP of Bangladesh in this 5-year period is going to be $2,756, while for India it is going to be $2,729. So Bangladesh per capita GDP is going to be little more than that of India in this 5-year period. The reason why this is happening is because Bangladesh has recorded a stellar performance when it comes to its export growth, particularly in the garments and the apparel section. So Bangladesh has been able to export so much, that is because it has lowered its tariffs and it has integrated itself with the global supply chains. So this is how the comparison is made with Bangladesh. And for India, yesterday itself we discussed how the IMF has estimated that this year India is going to contract by minus 10.3%. So if we really want to bring back India to a normal economic growth, and if we want to clock a good economic performance coming year, we need to also perform very good on our exports. So export performance is very important for the overall economic performance of a country. We have to increase our exports, and this is possible not by raising our tariffs but by lowering our tariffs. So this is one thing that is being told in this particular editorial, that if India wants to improve its economic growth, it has to do well on its export. And how to do well on the export is by lowering the tariffs, integrating with the global supply chain, embracing more free trade agreements. This is the way to go about. So again, the article quotes about Arvind Subramanian. Arvind Subramanian, as you all know, is a former chief economic advisor. So what Arvind Subramanian says is that now if you look at China before couple of years before was the heart of the low cost manufacturing in the world. Why this happened is because of the low wages that were prevailing in China. But what Arvind Subramanian notes is that the wages in China are now increasing. Because of an increase in the wages in China, nearly $140 billion worth of exports, which includes the garments and apparels, leather and footwear. So nearly $140 billion of exports from China has vacated because of an increase in the wages in China. So when China is vacating its space, then there must be other countries who can fill in the space and grab the opportunity, among which India and Bangladesh can very much fill in the space and grab the opportunity. While Bangladesh is grabbing the opportunity by lowering its tariffs and it is able to increase its exports and perform really well, but India, on the other hand, India's exports have been very sluggish, and therefore this has impacted India's economic growth. So if India has to take an opportunity of the China vacating this whole space, then India will have to come out with policies that will increase India's exports competitiveness, and India should be able to increase its export. This can happen by integrating with the global supply chains, lowering the tariffs, and not by following the policy of protectionism. So this is what Arvind Subramanian says. So as I always say, quote some such experts in your answers. That can add more value to your answer, and also add some international comparisons, like how in this case we took the example of Bangladesh and compared that with India. So this can also be an important argument when you are writing the pros and cons of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or about the India's policies of inward looking, where India is trying to increase the barriers to trade internationally. So this is a part of that analysis. Now, these were the other articles that weren't important. So this is about bypassing the parliament. Parliament we have already discussed in detail, and this there was nothing new in this. And so there was nothing again related to the labor laws that was recently introduced, and an analysis of this we have again already seen. Then Exam Warriors is again about the NEP, the high cutoffs in the DU, that NEP should be used as an opportunity to bring out reforms that can enable the holistic development of children and not just encourage rote learning. So these were the issues. Again, the Nobel Prize of to the World Food Program, which we have already discussed. So these were the important things that were there. Again, nothing new in these articles. We have already discussed them in detail, and much more than what is given in the articles. This is the question for tomorrow, which is what are the causes of urban floods and how do we tackle and mitigate them? So this is a 15-marker question for 250 words. And again, I urge as many of you as possible come and do write your answers. So if you're not writing, then it's your own loss. So now let's broadly discuss some of the important points that I wanted to share with you. In the question that we took up last time, which is about the analyzing the success of the immunization program in India. So the first thing that you can do, I have gone through several answers that you have written in the comment section. So more or less, just by Googling, we know the immunization program, when it started, what were the major initiatives taken by India, how have they performed, along with data, you can already get it very easily. So that is not a problem per se. That is, content or information per se is not a problem. But then you will also have to think about a few other things. For example, when you're writing such kind of an answer, you can experiment with drawing a timeline. So you can just draw a timeline showing what has been the progress of immunization programs in India, starting from 1985 when we started the universal immunization program, and under which we started the pulse polio program. So when once we were the polio endemic country, but now we are totally free of polio. Then we started the mission Indradhanush. Then we enhanced it to cover some of the endemic districts, more endemic districts, and then we started the intensified mission Indradhanush. So like that, you can experiment with timeline by quoting the when these programs were started. So such timeline you can experiment in the beginning of your just after your introduction. You can try this timeline, which kind of gives the evaluator an entire picture about what has been the journey of India's overall immunization program. So this itself gives a broad picture of what you will be talking in the next couple of pages. So this is one thing that you can try. The second thing that we need to understand is whenever I read your answers, it was all about vaccines. It was all about these 3-4 programs that the government has launched. So we have covered these many children, we have these many doses of vaccines have been given. So this has been the rate of immunization in the country. Everything is okay, but immunization is just not about the giving of vaccines to the people. there is a lot of background work also that goes on. So government also needs to encourage the biotechnology companies to manufacture more effective vaccines. We need to encourage research and development in the vaccine manufacturing. So that part you have to cover. Secondly, vaccines, many of the vaccines are not very simple to give. It's the healthcare workers will have to be trained in giving the vaccines, so this aspect is again very important. So it is just not about giving the vaccines which needs to be emphasized upon. You have to also emphasize upon the peripheral things, like how these vaccines are stored. That day we spoke about even, so which is a network that gives a real-time information about the stocks of various vaccines and the temperature at which they are stored. So that you have to mention when you're writing about immunization programs and vaccination. So all of those things you have to mention about the background that happens before the vaccine comes, which is about the research and development and encouragement to the biotechnology companies that the government must give. And then during the vaccination, what happens is about the storage and ensuring that the stocks of the vaccines are there, and training and capacity building of healthcare workers so that they are able to inject the vaccine in the right way. So all of these things, portions also you have to cover. And also another point that needs to be covered is when you're talking about vaccines, it is not just about India giving these vaccines to people in India. When we think of the generic medicines, India is the pharmacy of the world. So India has even previously it has supplied vaccination doses to several countries, poor countries and our poor neighbors. It has given supply of the vaccines also. So how India can, again in the times of COVID, many of the countries are trying to find out the vaccination for COVID. So in that case, what in a role India should play, and how it can help out the poor, its poorer neighbors and the other poor countries. So that also you have to mention. And then you should not forget to mention about the international collaboration that India is doing. So India is collaborating with UNICEF. UNICEF has played a very important role in eradication of polio from India. In fact, many of the endemic districts in India, UNICEF had a very important role to play in reaching out to these people who were very suspicious of vaccines, and they have played a very critical role in ensuring that the vaccine reaches everybody. So you have to highlight the role of these institutions. There is Gavi, which again you have to highlight. I have forgotten the full form, but you can Google it. There is Gavi, which is you have to highlight, and then the role of UNICEF, which is again has to be highlighted. India's collaboration with WHO, and so all of these international collaborations also you have to highlight when you're talking about immunization. And what else? Yes, don't forget to write some extra element which is like a case study or something. I remember having read once how UNICEF was trying to increase the immunization cover in Rajasthan by offering some small inducements, like those who get vaccinated will be given thali or lentils. So like that immunization cover was it tried to increase the immunization cover. So these kind of case studies, if you incorporate in your answer, because people are very suspicious about vaccination. So even the Muslim community considers it to be haram or something. So like that you have to write some extra element, some case study. And then one more thing is, many of you just write, even if you know the information, you are not writing on the paper. For example, you are writing that information, education, communication campaigns need to be conducted. So people need to be made more aware. So community volunteers must be there, and they must reach out to the people and tell them and all that. Yes, we must do, but also whenever you're writing such statements, if you are aware of an example, try to give it then and there. For example, just if you're writing IEC and then say that we have to increase the level of awareness among the population about the importance of vaccination. For example, Do Boond Zindagi Ki ads under the Pulse Polio program. So that's it. It takes just a few words, but it adds a lot of weightage to your answer. So don't forget to mention such small examples. So this is about the structure we could discuss, and rest I have also given supporting content, which is because I already saw your answers and I already know that you have sufficient content. So I'm going to give you one small case study which you can again use in your answers. So if you really want to the exam, do write as many answers as possible. So that's it for today. Thank you.